So there is a perception that catamarans and trimarans aren't able to do offshore passages. There's easy to refute with the evidence from some of the more well-travelled designs, particularly designs like the older Prague boats, but also modern boats like Outremer. They are able to make extended passages offshore. And if one thinks back to the very earliest offshore passages, they were all made in multihulls because the proas of the Pacific tribes made ocean voyages thousands of years ago. The other aspect of making them safe offshore, of course, is that with the low weight of a catamaran or a trimaran, it's easy to produce positive buoyancy, and so even if they're holed, they won't sink. So another myth that is easy to rebuff is the suggestion that catamarans capsize frequently. There are many, many thousands of nautical miles travelled now round the world where it's very evident that catamarans haven't experienced a capsize. There are a few catamarans that have capsized, like there are a few monohulls that have lost their keels and got holed and have sunk. But the experience that catamarans capsize regularly clearly isn't the case. Many multi-hull myths have come out of experiences with some individual catamarans and trimarans, and the suggestion that catamarans won't go upwind is a typical example of that. So in the 60s and 70s designs, where they were trying to make them as safe as possible, they built in very low bridge deck clearances with canoe sterns to stop them being pushed too fast downwind. Unfortunately, one of the consequences of giving them low bridge deck clearance and smaller sail plans is that their upwind performance was not very good. However, modern catamaran designs with more bridge deck clearance, with larger sail plans, have proven to be both safe and able to go upwind. And it's not unusual for a catamaran or a trimaran, a modern cruising catamaran or performance catamaran, to go upwind at 35 degrees to the apparent wind. Most catamarans have an engine in each hull, and so the myth that they're hard to park is also quite easy to debunk, because manoeuvring a catamaran is very easy. It's a lot easier than many monohulls, and to that extent you can see that most monohulls these days have a bow thruster in them to allow them to rotate and to park easily, whereas very, very few catamarans need a bow thruster. The ability to manoeuvre, to put one hull ahead and one hull astern, gives you the opportunity to turn a catamaran in its own length. There are few powerboats or sailboats that are able to do that. Another myth that a lot of potential catamaran buyers are aware of and are concerned about is the ability for a catamaran to go upwind without the slamming, the bridge deck area hitting and touching the water. Now, the reality is, of course, that even the cross-channel catamaran ferries will touch the water from time to time, but the higher the bridge deck clearance, then the less likely it is for them to touch and to slam. The older designs, the 70s designs, it wasn't uncommon for them to be very close to the water, and therefore the reputation for slamming is quite justified. For modern catamarans with bridge deck clearances of 600 to 800 millimeters, it's much less common. And the other aspect of it is the consequence. So with the older designs, when they touch the water, it slowed them down quite a lot. With the modern designs, they are much less likely to be slowed down because they have a lot more bridge deck clearance, and the impact from the sea, from the wave, is a glancing blow on the bottom of the boat rather than actually slowing the boat down by the wave. One of the very popular myths, very current at some of the boat shows that we've attended recently, is the perception that catamarans are very expensive to berth. This one is quite easy to overcome for two reasons. Catamarans are very manoeuvrable and we've covered that in one of the other myths. 2 engines, they're able to get into places where it's hard to get a similar length monohull. And the second is that they don't draw very much. They have little draft. So it's very often that if you work with a marina or with a berthing company, then you're able to find somewhere in the marina that they can't put the larger boats. An example would be here in the UK in Chichester Marina. Chichester Marina have a gravel pit marina, so the edges of the gravel pit are quite shallow. They still have the same overall length available as the other berths, but the draft is very shallow and it's quite tight to get into it. The catamaran can get into that space quite easily, and therefore everybody wins. The marina gets a full-size berth holder and the berth holder gets a